The dust-laden wind carried Brianna Darby's letter of promise all the way from Boston to the wild frontier of Montana Territory. But as she stepped off the stagecoach in the mining town of Copper Creek in the summer of 1885, she knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. The man waiting for her with narrowed eyes and a scowl beneath his weathered hat was not the gentle-faced suitor whose photograph she had carried across 2,000 miles. "You ain't Sarah," the man spat, eyeing Brianna with suspicion as she clutched her carpetbag. "I paid good money for Sarah Jenkins." Brianna's heart hammered against her ribs as the small crowd gathered around the stagecoach began to whisper. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins during the jarring journey, and she fought to maintain her composure as curious eyes assessed her travel-worn blue dress. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," she began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "My name is Brianna Darby. I arranged correspondence with a Mr. Oliver O'Malley." The man's face darkened. "Ain't no O'Malley expecting no bride in these parts. You've been had, miss, or more likely, you're the one doing the having." The stagecoach driver tossed down her trunk, dust billowing as it hit the ground. "Fares paid to Copper Creek and no further," he announced, already climbing back onto his seat. "Please," Brianna called to the driver, panic rising in her throat. "There must be some mistake." "I have letters." "Letters can be forged," interrupted a woman in a gaudy dress, her painted lips curled in amusement. Wouldn't be the first time some city girl thought she could come out west with a sob story. "I'm not lying," Brianna protested, reaching into her reticule to produce the correspondence she'd treasured for months. "Mr. O'Malley owns the Double Circle Ranch. He wrote that it was just northeast of town." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and Brianna felt her cheeks flush with humiliation as the stagecoach pulled away, leaving her stranded amid strangers and suspicion. "Double Circle belongs to Owen O'Rourke," someone called out, "and he ain't sent for no bride." "I think you'd better come with me to the sheriff's office," the first man said, reaching for her arm. "We don't take kindly to swindlers in Copper Creek." Brianna recoiled from his grasp, nearly stumbling over her trunk. "I am not a swindler. There's been a mistake, that's all." "Leave her be, Thornton." The deep voice cut through the crowd like a knife. The sea of onlookers parted, revealing a tall man astride a chestnut stallion. His broad shoulders were silhouetted against the setting sun, face shadowed beneath a well-worn Stetson. He dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime on horseback. "This ain't your concern, O'Rourke," Thornton replied, but there was a new hesitancy in his tone. The newcomer approached, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step. He stopped before Brianna, and she found herself looking up into eyes the color of a summer storm gray with hints of blue, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You say you have letters from the owner of the Double Circle?" he asked, his voice quieter now but no less commanding. Brianna nodded, offering the well-worn papers with trembling fingers. "From Oliver O'Malley. We've been corresponding for nearly 6 months." The man took the letters, his calloused fingers brushing against hers. He scanned the pages, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat brim. "My name is Owen O'Rourke," he finally said, looking up from the letters, "and I own the Double Circle Ranch." Brianna's heart sank. "But these letters were written by my foreman, Oliver O'Malley," Owen finished, folding the papers carefully and returning them to her. "Who had no right to do so, and who left my employ 3 weeks ago without a word of explanation." A wave of dizziness washed over Brianna. All her hopes, her carefully laid plans, her last dollars spent on passage west, all built on deception. She swayed slightly, and Owen's hand shot out to steady her elbow. "So she is a liar." the garishly dressed woman crowed triumphantly. Owen's gaze remained fixed on Brianna, something unreadable flickering in those storm cloud eyes. "No," he said firmly. "She's been lied to." He turned to address the crowd with a hard stare that sent most of them shuffling back to their business. "Show's over." Thornton hesitated. "You vouching for her, O'Rourke?" "I am." Those two simple words, spoken with unwavering certainty, seemed to settle the matter. The remaining onlookers dispersed, leaving Brianna alone with the tall rancher and her shattered dreams. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would your foreman?" "That's what I aim to find out," Owen replied grimly. He sighed, removing his hat to reveal thick, dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. Beneath the trailed dust and stern expression, Brianna realized he couldn't be more than 30 years old. "Miss Darby, I apologize for O'Malley's deception. I had no knowledge of his correspondence with you." Brianna fought to maintain her composure. "What am I to do now? I've spent everything I had to come west." Owen replaced his hat, considering her with those penetrating eyes. "Do you have family back east you can return to?" The question struck like a physical blow. "No," she admitted. "There's nothing for me in Boston anymore." The memory of her father's funeral, the discovery of his gambling debts, and the humiliation of being evicted from their home flashed through her mind. Her position as a schoolteacher had been eliminated, and with no references or prospects, O'Malley's marriage proposal had seemed like divine providence. Owen nodded as though her answer confirmed something for him. "The town has a small hotel. I'll pay for your lodging tonight while you consider your options." "I don't accept charity, Mr. O'Rourke," Brianna said, lifting her chin despite the desperation clawing at her insides. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "It's not charity. It's making right what my employee did wrong." Before she could argue further, he turned to a young boy who'd been watching the exchange with undisguised curiosity. "Tommy, take Miss Darby's trunk to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Tell her I'll be by later to settle the bill." "Yes, sir, Mr. O'Rourke." The boy sprang into action, struggling to drag the heavy trunk down the dusty street. "Mrs. Holloway's is more respectable than the hotel," Owen explained, taking Brianna's carpetbag despite her protests. "I'll escort you there." As they walked down the main street of Copper Creek, Brianna was acutely aware of the eyes watching from shop windows and saloon doorways. The town was larger than she'd expected, with false-fronted buildings lining both sides of the wide dirt street. A church steeple rose in the distance, and the clang of a blacksmith's hammer provided a steady counterpoint to their footsteps. "Copper Creek's been booming since the new mine opened last year," Owen said, seeming to sense her assessment of the town. "Good people mostly once they know they can trust you." "And can they trust me, Mr. O'Rourke?" Brianna asked quietly. "You don't know me at all." He glanced down at her, those storm-gray eyes measuring. "I'm a fair judge of character, Miss Darby. Had to be to survive out here." He paused before adding, "And I know when someone's telling the truth." Mrs. Holloway proved to be a plump, efficient widow who asked no questions when Owen explained that Miss Darby needed lodging. If she was curious about the circumstances, she hid it well, simply showing Brianna to a small but clean room at the back of the house. "Supper's at 6 sharp," the landlady informed her. "Breakfast at 7. I don't allow gentlemen callers in the rooms, and the door is locked at 10 o'clock." "Thank you," Brianna replied, relief washing over her at the simple normalcy of these rules after the chaos of the day. When Mrs. Holloway departed, Owen lingered in the doorway. "I'll have some inquiries to make about O'Malley," he said. "In the meantime, you should rest." "It's a hard journey from Boston." Brianna nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. "Mr. O'Rourke, I don't know how to thank you, no need." he cut her off, settling his hat more firmly on his head. This isn't how we treat visitors in Montana, especially ladies who have traveled so far. He hesitated, then added, I'll call on you tomorrow if that's acceptable. Perhaps by then I'll have news of O'Malley. After he left, Brianna sank onto the narrow bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back to fall. She wept for her foolishness, for the money she'd spent, and for the desperate hope that had driven her to trust a man she'd never met. When the tears subsided, she washed her face in the basin provided, changed into her nightgown, and fell into an exhausted sleep before Mrs. Holloway's dinner bell even rang. She dreamed of storm-gray eyes and a deep voice saying, I know when someone's telling the truth. Morning brought clarity and resolve. Brianna rose early, washed thoroughly, and put on her best dress, a navy blue cotton with white piping that had survived the journey relatively unwrinkled. She twisted her hair into a neat chignon and practiced her most composed expression in the small mirror above the washstand. If she was to be stranded in Copper Creek, she would face it with dignity. Perhaps the town needed a schoolteacher, or she could find work as a shop girl or seamstress. She had her education and her willingness to work hard. Somehow, she would make a new start. Mrs. Holloway's breakfast of hot cakes, bacon, and strong coffee renewed Brianna's strength. The other boarders' two elderly sisters and a traveling salesman made polite conversation, though she could sense their curiosity about the newcomer in their midst. Mr. O'Rourke asked me to tell you he'll call at 10 o'clock, Mrs. Holloway informed her as she cleared the breakfast plates. That man's punctual as sunrise, so you can set your watch by it. True to prediction, at precisely 10 o'clock, a knock sounded at the front door. Brianna smoothed her skirts nervously as Mrs. Holloway showed Owen into the small parlor. In daylight, he looked even more imposing, tall and broad-shouldered in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his face freshly shaved but still weathered from years in the sun and wind. Miss Darby, he greeted her, hat in hand. I hope you rested well. Yes, thank you, she replied, gesturing for him to take a seat opposite her. Have you learned anything about Mr. O'Malley? Owen's expression darkened. Some, but not enough. He left town 3 weeks ago, supposedly heading to Billings. I've sent telegrams, but no response yet. He paused. Before he left, he withdrew nearly $200 from the ranch account, money I had authorized him to use for supplies. Brianna gasped. The same amount I sent him for my travel expenses. I suspected as much, Owen nodded grimly. It seems he was running a scheme, though why he targeted you specifically, I don't know. Brianna twisted her hands in her lap. I placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper. Educated lady of good character seeks correspondence with gentlemen of means in the Western Territories, with view to matrimony. It was common enough many women from my circle had found husbands that way after the war left so many young men dead. And O'Malley responded, pretending to be me. Owen concluded, his jaw tight with anger. Not exactly, Brianna corrected. He wrote as Oliver O'Malley, owner of the Double Circle Ranch. He described the property, the cattle operation, the house he'd built. He seemed genuine. She felt heat rising to her cheeks at the memory of her gullibility. He sent a photograph. May I see it? Brianna hesitated, then reached into her reticule and withdrew the small photograph she'd carried across the country. She handed it to Owen, watching as he examined it. This is O'Malley all right, he confirmed. But the house behind him is mine, not his. He was my foreman, lived in a cabin near the bunkhouse. He passed the photograph back. The letters described the main house. Brianna nodded. 2 stories with a wide porch and blue curtains in the windows. He wrote about the view of the mountains from the sitting room. Owen's expression grew troubled. That's my home exactly. O'Malley has only been inside a handful of times, but he must have been planning this for some time. He leaned forward. Miss Darby, I believe he intended to meet you here, take whatever money or valuables you brought with you, and disappear. When I unexpectedly dismissed him for other irregularities I'd discovered, he fled rather than face you or me. The realization of how vulnerable she had been, how close she'd come to even worse deception, made Brianna feel physically ill. I was a fool, she whispered. No, Owen said firmly. You were deceived by a practiced liar who took advantage of your good faith. He hesitated. Miss Darby, I've made some inquiries in town. Mrs. Peterson, who runs the millinery shop, is looking for an assistant, and the town council has been discussing hiring a teacher for the fall term. Surprised by his thoughtfulness, Brianna managed a small smile. You've gone to considerable trouble on my behalf, Mr. O'Rourke. I feel responsible, he admitted. O'Malley was my employee, using my name and property in his scheme. The responsibility is mine alone, Brianna insisted, but I'm grateful for your kindness. I'll call on Mrs. Peterson this afternoon. Owen nodded, seeming pleased with her resolve. There's something else, he added, his tone more hesitant now. I'd like you to come to the double circle. Brianna blinked in surprise. I beg your pardon, just to visit, he clarified quickly. The letters described my home, and you traveled all this way expecting to see it. It seems only fair you should at least have that much truth from your journey. When she hesitated, he added, My housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, will be present the entire time, of course. I thought perhaps Sunday after church, if you'd care to join me for the service first. The offer was unexpected, and Brianna found herself touched by the gesture. It would be a kind of closure, she supposed, to see the reality of what O'Malley had described in his letters. That's very kind of you, she said finally. I would like that. Something like relief crossed Owen's face. Good. I'll call for you at 9 on Sunday morning then. He rose to leave, then paused. Miss Darby, I want you to know that despite how you arrived here, Copper Creek could use someone with your education and refinement. There might be a place for you here if you choose to stay. After he left, Brianna sat for a long time in the parlor, considering his words. Was it possible to build a new life from the ruins of deception? Perhaps it was time to find out. True to her word, Brianna visited Mrs. Peterson's millinery shop that afternoon. The owner, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with surprisingly fashionable taste, assessed Brianna's neat appearance and Boston accent with approval. Mr. O'Rourke mentioned you might be looking for employment, Mrs. Peterson said as she showed Brianna around the small but well-stocked shop. He speaks highly of your character. Mr. O'Rourke hardly knows me, Brianna replied honestly. Mrs. Peterson's lips twitched in amusement. Owen O'Rourke doesn't speak highly of anyone he doesn't respect, and he doesn't respect many. She gestured to a half-finished hat on a workbench behind the counter. Do you sew, Miss Darby? Yes, quite well, Brianna answered. I made most of my own clothes. Show me, Mrs. Peterson challenged, handing her a needle and some trim. For the next hour, Brianna demonstrated her skills with various stitches and embellishments. By the end, Mrs. Peterson nodded with satisfaction. You'll do, she announced. I can offer $3 a week to start, more if you prove yourself. Hours are 8 to 6 with Sundays off. You can start Monday. Relief washed over Brianna. It wasn't much, but it would keep her housed and fed while she established herself. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I accept. Word of Brianna's employment spread quickly through the small town. By the time she returned to the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway informed her that the mayor's wife wished to discuss the possibility of piano lessons for her daughters, and the mercantile owner wondered if she might help with his accounts one evening a week. Folks are curious about you, Mrs. Holloway explained as she served Brianna a slice of apple pie. "But they're good people mostly. Once they heard Owen O'Rourke was vouching for you, doors started opening." "He's been uncommonly kind," Brianna admitted. Mrs. Holloway's eyes twinkled. "Owen's not known for being kind, my dear. Fair, honest, and harder working than any 3 men, yes. But he keeps to himself since he came back from the war. Runs that ranch with an iron hand and rarely comes to town except for supplies or church." "He fought in the war?" Brianna asked, her curiosity piqued. "Cavalry. Came back different, they say. Bought that ranch and built it up from nearly nothing." The landlady refilled Brianna's teacup. "His word means something in this town. If Owen O'Rourke says you're honest, no one's going to question it." Sunday arrived clear and cool, with the scent of pine carried on the breeze from the mountains that framed the valley. Brianna dressed in her church clothes, a modest lavender dress with a matching bonnet, and was ready when Owen arrived in a polished buckboard wagon. He dressed for church as well, in a black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. When he helped her into the wagon, his hands at her waist were strong and sure, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. The small white church was filled to capacity, with families from town and surrounding ranches packed into the simple wooden pews. Brianna felt the weight of curious stares as Owen escorted her to a seat, but the congregation was welcoming, with many stopping to introduce themselves before the service began. Pastor Williams preached on forgiveness and new beginnings, and Brianna couldn't help wondering if the sermon had been chosen with her situation in mind. The hymns were familiar, however, and the simple faith of the congregation reminded her of happier times in her childhood, when her mother had still been alive and their family intact. After the service, Owen guided her through more introductions, including to the mayor and the school board chairman, who expressed interest in her qualifications as a teacher. By the time they departed for the ranch, Brianna felt cautiously optimistic about her reception in Copper Creek. The drive to the double circle took nearly an hour, following a winding road that climbed into the rolling foothills. Owen pointed out landmarks and neighboring ranches, his deep voice painting a picture of the community and landscape. "That's Larson's place," he indicated a distant cluster of buildings. "Good man, fair neighbor. Over that ridge is Blackwell's spread. Stay clear of him if you can. Mean-spirited and dishonest in his dealings." "You seem to know everyone," Brianna observed. Owen shrugged. "Have to out here. Your neighbors can be your salvation or your ruin in hard times." They crested a hill, and suddenly the Double Circle Ranch spread before them, a collection of well-maintained buildings nestled in a verdant valley, with mountains rising majestically behind. A creek wound through pastures dotted with grazing cattle, and in the center stood a handsome 2-story house with a wide porch, exactly as O'Malley had described in his letters. Brianna's breath caught at the sight. "It's beautiful." Owen glanced at her, something softening in his expression. "Thank you. Took 7 years to build it up to what you see." As they approached, Brianna noticed the careful attention to detail: the flower beds bordering the house, the freshly painted trim, the rocking chairs on the porch. This was not just a ranch, it was a home lovingly created and maintained. Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, greeted them at the door, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had Sunday dinner waiting, and the dining room table was set with fine china and crystal that seemed at odds with the frontier setting. "It was my mother's," Owen explained when he caught Brianna admiring the delicate pattern on the plates. "One of the few things I brought west with me." Over roast beef and potatoes, Owen shared more about the ranch, the breeding program he'd established for his cattle, the crops they grew, the challenges of the harsh winters and occasional drought. "You've accomplished so much," Brianna said admiringly. "It's no wonder Mr. O'Malley borrowed your success for his deception." A shadow crossed Owen's face. "I received a telegram yesterday. O'Malley was seen in Billings 2 weeks ago, but he's moved on. The authorities there will keep looking, but—" He shrugged. "I doubt we'll recover your money." Brianna set down her fork. "It's not just the money, it's the trust I placed in him. The future I thought I was building." She paused. "Though perhaps it's for the best. I might have been trapped in a marriage to a dishonest man." "There is that," Owen agreed, his gray eyes studying her face. "Sometimes what seems like misfortune is actually providence." After dinner, Owen gave her a tour of the house. It was spacious yet comfortable, with large windows that captured the mountain views and simple, quality furnishings. The blue curtains hung in the sitting room just as O'Malley had described, and the view from the windows matched the poetic descriptions from his letters. "He captured it well," Brianna murmured. "I can see why you love it here." Owen nodded, watching her face as she took in his home. "It's peaceful. After the war, I needed that more than anything." Brianna turned to him. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned you served in the cavalry." 4 years, he confirmed, his expression growing distant. "Saw things no man should have to see. Did things I hope to be forgiven for someday." He shook off the darkness with visible effort. "When I came home to Pennsylvania, everything felt too small, too crowded. I needed space and purpose." "And you found it here," Brianna concluded. "I did." He led her to the study, where maps of the ranch property lined one wall and ledgers filled a bookshelf. "This is where O'Malley would have written those letters to you, when I was away last winter checking on our cattle in the north pastures. He had access to the house then." Brianna examined the masculine space, the heavy desk, the leather chair, the shelves of books that revealed Owen to be far more well-read than the average rancher. "You have quite a library, Mr. O'Rourke." "Owen," he corrected. "After all this, I think we can dispense with formalities, Miss Darby." "Brianna," she offered in return, smiling. He returned her smile, and for the first time since she'd met him, the stern set of his features relaxed completely. The transformation was remarkable, the hard lines of his face softening to reveal a handsome man whose gray eyes crinkled at the corners. "Brianna," he repeated, as if testing the sound of her name on his tongue. "It suits you." An unexpected warmth blossomed in her chest at the simple compliment, and she turned away to examine the bookshelves, hoping he hadn't noticed her blush. They spent the rest of the afternoon on the porch, where Owen pointed out the various ranch buildings and explained the operations. Ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully when they passed, though Brianna noticed curious glances directed her way. "They're wondering about you," Owen explained. "It's not often I bring visitors, especially women, to the ranch." "I'm sure I'm quite the topic of conversation," Brianna said wryly. The supposed mail-order bride who arrived for the wrong man. Owen's expression turned serious. "You're a lady who was wronged and is facing her circumstances with remarkable courage. Anyone who says differently will answer to me." The fierce protectiveness in his voice caught Brianna by surprise. This man had no obligation to her, yet he'd gone out of his way to help her establish herself in Copper Creek, to defend her reputation, to show her kindness when she needed it most. "Why are you doing all this, Owen?" she asked quietly. "You could have simply sent me on my way." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "When I came back from the war, I was lost, angry, haunted by what I'd seen and done." He glanced at her. "An older man, a stranger, gave me a chance when I needed it most. Hired me to work his ranch in Wyoming, taught me the business, lent me the money to buy this place when it came available." His voice softened. "He saved my life without ever knowing it. I swore I'd pass on that kindness if I ever had the chance." Brianna's throat tightened with emotion. "Well, you have. And I'm grateful." As the afternoon light began to fade, Owen reluctantly announced it was time to return to town. The drive back was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts as the wagon rolled through the gathering dusk. When they reached the boarding house, Owen helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "I enjoyed your company today, Brianna." "And I yours," she replied honestly. "Thank you for showing me your home. It helped close a chapter, I think." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Perhaps we can open a new one." He hesitated, then added more formally, "Would you allow me to call on you again? Perhaps next Saturday evening?" The question hung between them in the twilight, weighted with possibilities neither of them had anticipated when they'd met just days before. Brianna found herself nodding before she'd fully considered the implications. "I'd like that very much, Owen." His smile, rare and transformative, was her reward. "Until Saturday, then. Good night, Brianna." As she watched him drive away, Brianna realized that for the first time since arriving in Copper Creek, she was looking forward to what tomorrow might bring. The week passed in a flurry of activity as Brianna settled into her new position at the millinery shop. Mrs. Peterson proved to be a demanding but fair employer, and Brianna's nimble fingers and eye for design quickly made her an asset. By Wednesday, she was helping customers select hat styles and trimmings. By Friday, she had created her first custom design for the banker's wife, earning Mrs. Peterson's grudging approval and a promise of increased responsibilities. Word of the talented newcomer spread through the town's female population, and the shop saw increased traffic as ladies found excuses to meet the Boston woman who had, according to increasingly embellished rumors, been dramatically rescued by Owen O'Rourke. "You're good for business, Mrs. Peterson observed dryly as she closed the shop on Saturday afternoon. "Though you might want to set the record straight about you and O'Rourke before the gossips have you engaged to be married." Brianna nearly dropped the hat she was placing in a box. "What? That's absurd. We barely know each other." The older woman raised an eyebrow. "That's not stopping the speculation. He's the most eligible bachelor in the county, owns the largest ranch, no family entanglements, and handsome to boot, if you like the strong, silent type. And he's never shown interest in any local girl, not even Eliza Thornton, who practically threw herself at him last Christmas." "We're merely acquaintances," Brianna protested. "He's been kind to me, that's all." "Owen O'Rourke doesn't merely anything," Mrs. Peterson replied with a knowing smile. "And he's calling on you tonight, isn't he?" Brianna couldn't deny it, nor could she deny the flutter of anticipation she felt at the prospect. She hurried back to the boarding house to prepare, washing away the dust and lint of the workday and changing into her best evening dress, a deep blue silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, one of the few fine things she'd brought from Boston. Mrs. Holloway poked her head in as Brianna was arranging her hair. "You look lovely, my dear. There's fresh coffee in the parlor and I've set out some of my shortbread." She hesitated. "Mr. O'Rourke is punctual as always, already waiting downstairs." Brianna's heart skipped. "I didn't hear him arrive." "Man moves like a cat for all his size," Mrs. Holloway said with amusement. "Don't keep him waiting too long." Owen stood when Brianna entered the parlor, and the appreciation in his eyes as he took in her appearance sent warmth coursing through her veins. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." She took in his own appearance, a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a crisp white shirt, and polished boots. His dark hair was neatly combed, though one lock insisted on falling over his forehead. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. O'Rourke." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "I make an effort when the occasion warrants it." They dined at the hotel restaurant, the finest establishment in Copper Creek, though it would have been considered modest in Boston. Owen was a perfect gentleman throughout the meal, inquiring about her week and sharing news of the ranch. Brianna found herself relaxing in his company, enjoying his dry wit and thoughtful observations. After dinner, he suggested a walk along the creek for which the town was named. The evening was mild, with a full moon illuminating the path and the sound of water flowing over rocks providing a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "I've heard you're making quite an impression at the millinery shop," Owen remarked as they strolled. "Mrs. Peterson is not easily impressed." Brianna smiled. "I'm enjoying the work more than I expected. There's something satisfying about creating something beautiful with your hands." "I understand that feeling," Owen agreed. "Building something from nothing, watching it grow and flourish." He paused. "The school board is meeting next week to discuss the teaching position. Chairman Williams asked if you'd be interested in an interview." "I would," Brianna said eagerly. "Teaching was my profession in Boston. I miss it." "I mentioned your experience." They seemed impressed. Brianna glanced at him curiously. "You've done so much to help me establish myself here. I'm not sure I can ever repay your kindness." Owen stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. "I don't want repayment, Brianna, I want—" He hesitated, seeming to search for words. "I want you to find happiness here, to feel at home in Copper Creek." There was something in his voice, a depth of feeling that suggested more than simple neighborly concern. Brianna's breath caught as he reached out to brush a stray lock of hair from her cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. "Is that possible, do you think?" he asked softly. "After the way your journey here began," Brianna looked up at him, at the genuine concern in his storm-gray eyes, and felt something shift inside her heart. "I'm beginning to think it might be," she whispered. For a moment she thought he might kiss her there beneath the moonlight. His gaze dropped to her lips and he leaned forward slightly. But then he seemed to recollect himself, stepping back with a rueful smile. "We should head back," he said. "Mrs. Holloway will be locking the doors soon." As they walked back toward town, Owen's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers entwining with her smaller ones in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. Neither of them mentioned it, but neither pulled away, and Brianna found herself treasuring the simple connection. At the boarding house door, Owen finally released her hand. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "Perhaps after church tomorrow. There's a spot by the lake I'd like to show you." "I'd like that," Brianna replied, surprised by how much she meant it. He nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Good night then, Brianna." "Good night, Owen." She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the night, and realized with a mixture of alarm and exhilaration that she was developing feelings for Owen O'Rourke, feelings that went far beyond gratitude for his kindness or appreciation of his handsome features. The realization kept her awake long into the night, contemplating the unexpected turn her life had taken. She'd come to Montana expecting to marry one man, only to find herself drawn to another. Was she simply transferring her hopes and dreams to the first kind man she'd met? Or was there something genuine growing between them? Sunday's church service was followed by a picnic lunch by the lake. Owen had mentioned a secluded spot with a stunning view of the mountains reflected in crystal-clear water. They spent the afternoon talking about their pasts, their hopes, their beliefs. Owen told her about growing up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, about losing his parents to influenza while he was away at war, about his dreams for the double circle. Brianna shared her own story, her happy childhood cut short by her mother's death, her father's descent into gambling and drinking. her determination to support herself through teaching when their money ran out. She told him about the advertisement, about O'Malley's courtship through letters, about her desperate hope for a new beginning. "I feel foolish now," she admitted as they sat on a blanket by the lakeshore. "I should have asked more questions, been more cautious." Owen shook his head. "You were seeking a better life the only way you knew how. There's no shame in that." He picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the lake's surface. "Besides, if you hadn't answered that advertisement, you wouldn't be here now." The simple truth of it hung between them. If not for O'Malley's deception, she would never have met Owen O'Rourke, never have come to this peaceful lake on a Sunday afternoon, never have felt the slow burning attraction that was gradually consuming her doubts and fears. "No," she agreed softly, "I wouldn't." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, and the unexpected feelings that were developing as a result. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Brianna worked at the millinery shop during the week, gave piano lessons to the mayor's daughters on Wednesday evenings, and helped at the mercantile with the accounts on Thursdays. She interviewed with the school board and was hired to begin teaching in September when the new schoolhouse was completed. Every Saturday evening, Owen called for her at the boarding house, taking her to dinner or a town social or simply for long walks where they talked about everything and nothing. Sundays after church were spent at the ranch or exploring the countryside around Copper Creek. Gradually, the town's curiosity about them evolved into acceptance of their courtship, for that was what it clearly was becoming, though neither of them had put a name to it yet. In late August, as summer began to wane and the first hints of autumn tinged the air, Owen invited Brianna to the ranch for a special dinner. Mrs. Finch had outdone herself, preparing a feast that rivaled anything Brianna had eaten in Boston's finest restaurants. After dinner, Owen suggested a walk to watch the sunset from his favorite spot on the property. They strolled through a meadow thick with wildflowers, climbing a gentle slope to a promontory that overlooked the entire ranch and the mountains beyond. "I come here to think," Owen explained as they settled on a flat rock, "to remind myself why I work so hard." Brianna gazed out at the vista before them, the ranch buildings nestled in the valley, cattle grazing peacefully in the pastures, mountains painted gold and crimson by the setting sun. "It's breathtaking." "Yes," Owen agreed, though when she turned, she found him looking not at the view but at her. The intensity in his eyes made her pulse quicken. "Brianna," he began, his voice deeper than usual, "these past weeks, getting to know you has been the most unexpected joy of my life." She smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. "For me as well." Owen took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I know it hasn't been long and you came here expecting something entirely different, but I find myself—" He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I find myself falling in love with you." The simple declaration, spoken without artifice or elaborate phrasing, touched Brianna more deeply than any flowery profession could have. This was Owen, direct, honest, uncompromising in his integrity. "I never expected this," she whispered. "When I came to Copper Creek and discovered O'Malley's deception, I thought my dreams had been shattered." "And now?" Owen asked, vulnerability evident in his expression. Brianna reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Now I think perhaps they were just redirected to something real, something true." Owen's hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek. "Is that your way of saying you might love me too, Boston?" The nickname affectionate, teasing broke the tension, and Brianna laughed. "It might be, Cowboy." His smile was brilliant in the fading light. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, He leaned forward until their lips met in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with the release of weeks of restraint and growing desire. Brianna melted into him, her arms encircling his neck as his strong hands drew her closer. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly, Brianna Darby. No deception, no false pretenses. Just a man who's fallen in love with the most courageous, beautiful woman he's ever known." "I'd like that," Brianna replied, her voice husky with emotion. "Very much." They stayed on the hilltop until the stars emerged, talking about their future and the possibilities that lay before them. When Owen finally drove her back to town, Brianna felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The disaster that had brought her to Copper Creek had transformed into the greatest blessing of her life. The news that Sheriff Daniels had finally tracked down Oliver O'Malley came 2 weeks later. The former foreman had been arrested in Denver, where he'd apparently been running the same scheme with several other women. He'd been brought back to Copper Creek to face charges of fraud and theft. "He's asking to speak with you," the sheriff informed Brianna when he came to the millinery shop. "Says he wants to apologize." Brianna looked to Owen, who had accompanied the sheriff. His expression was grim, but he nodded. "Your choice, Boston. I'll be right beside you if you want to hear what he has to say." The jail was a small building at the end of the main street, with just 2 cells in the back. O'Malley sat on a narrow cot in one of them, his once handsome face haggard and unshaven. He looked up when Brianna and Owen entered, his eyes widening at the sight of them together. "Miss Darby," he began, rising to his feet. "I didn't expect that I'd still be in Copper Creek," Brianna finished for him. "Or that I'd be with Mr. O'Rourke." O'Malley had the grace to look ashamed. "Either, I suppose." He glanced at Owen, who stood with arms crossed, his face impassive. "Boss," he acknowledged with a nod. "I'm not your boss anymore, O'Malley," Owen replied coldly. "Say what you came to say." O'Malley sighed, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "I wanted to apologize, Miss Darby. What I did was wrong. I never meant for it to go so far." He paused. "It started as a joke, answering your advertisement. But then your letters were so genuine. I found myself creating this whole other life, pretending to be something I wasn't." He glanced around the cell. "Seems fitting I'd end up in a cage for living a lie." Brianna studied the man who had nearly ruined her life. In his letters, O'Malley had seemed so perfect, charming, educated, ambitious. The reality was a diminished figure, weak and dishonest. "Why did you take my money if you never intended to marry me?" she asked. O'Malley's shoulders slumped. "By then I was in too deep. I had gambling debts in Billings. It was wrong, I know that. I've paid for it, lost my job, my reputation, and now my freedom." Brianna felt Owen's hand at the small of her back, a silent reminder of his support. She drew strength from his presence. "I forgive you, Mr. O'Malley," she said finally. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry the burden of bitterness. You deceived me, but in doing so, you led me to where I was meant to be all along." She turned to Owen, whose storm-gray eyes softened as they met hers. "Sometimes the wrong path leads you to the right destination." O'Malley looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. "You two are." "None of your business," Owen cut him off. He addressed Brianna. "You ready to go?" She nodded, taking one last look at the man whose letters had brought her across the country. "Goodbye, Mr. O'Malley. I hope you find a way to live honestly from now on." Outside the jail, Owen pulled Brianna into a fierce embrace. "You continue to amaze me," he murmured into her hair. "Not many would have the grace to forgive like that." Brianna leaned into his strength. "Holding on to anger would only give him power over me. I'm ready to move forward." Owen pulled back slightly, studying her face. "Forward sounds good to me, Boston." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "In fact, I was planning to ask you about that very thing tonight, but seeing as we're already having meaningful conversations." Brianna's heart began to race as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "Owen, I know it's fast," he said, his voice suddenly uncertain. "We've only known each other a few months, but I love you, Brianna Darby. I love your courage and your kindness, your stubbornness and your smile. I love the way you've made a place for yourself here despite everything. And I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears blurred Brianna's vision as she looked from the ring to the man holding it, this strong, honorable man who had stood by her from the beginning, who had seen the truth in her when others saw only deception. "Are you asking me to marry you, Cowboy?" she managed, her voice thick with emotion. A smile tugged at Owen's lips. "I believe I am, Boston. What do you say? Will you make an honest man out of me?" Brianna laughed through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Owen O'Rourke, I will marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, then lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I promise you won't regret it. No deceptions, no false pretenses. Just truth between us always." "I know the truth," Brianna replied softly, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "I'm yours, and you are mine." The kiss they shared there on the street, witnessed by half the town, sealed a promise that had begun in deception but would endure in honesty and love for all the years to come. They were married 3 weeks later in the white church, with the entire town in attendance. Brianna wore a gown of ivory satin that she and Mrs. Peterson had worked on together, and Owen looked so handsome in his black suit that she nearly forgot her vows at the sight of him waiting for her at the altar. Pastor William spoke of trust and new beginnings, of love that grows from unexpected soil, and of the divine plan that sometimes works through human error to bring about greater joy. When Owen and Brianna exchanged rings and promises, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. The celebration afterward was held at the Double Circle Ranch, with tables set up on the lawn and lanterns hanging from the trees. There was dancing and feasting until well after midnight, the entire community coming together to celebrate a love story that had begun in deception, but blossomed into something true and lasting. As the last guests departed and the newlyweds stood on the porch of what was now their home, Owen drew Brianna into his arms. "Happy, Mrs. O'Rourke?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. Brianna looked up at her husband, this strong, honorable man who had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined when she'd first stepped off that stagecoach. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she assured him. "And this is just the beginning." Owen's smile, rare and precious, lit his face. "The beginning of something true," he agreed, lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that promised a lifetime of love, honesty, and belonging. In the years that followed, the story of the mail-order bride who arrived for the wrong man became something of a legend in Copper Creek. Brianna established the town's first proper school, earning the respect and admiration of the community. Owen's ranch prospered, and their family grew with the birth of first a son and then twin daughters who inherited their father's storm-gray eyes and their mother's determined spirit. Oliver O'Malley served his sentence and left Montana, rumored to have found honest work in California's growing orange groves. His deception, meant to harm, had instead laid the foundation for a love story that would be told and retold through generations of the O'Rourke family. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the work of the day was done, Owen and Brianna would often sit on the porch of their home, watching the sun set behind the mountains, their hands intertwined as they marveled at the strange and winding path that had led them to each other. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked once on their 10th anniversary. Answering that advertisement, coming all this way only to be deceived, Brianna smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Not for a moment. Some lies lead to greater truths, and some wrong turns lead exactly where you're meant to be." She looked up at him, at the face she had grown to love more with each passing year. "I know the truth, Cowboy. I'm yours, always have been." "And I'm yours, Boston," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss as the first stars appeared in the Montana sky.